Get ready to listen to the greatest heavy metal podcast of all time! Heavy Metal War Stories with your host, Stevie Peavy.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Stevie Peavy, everybody's favorite guy, back again with another episode of Heavy Metal War Stories. And we have a cool episode today. People like Motley Crue, you know, we've got some people in the past that have been fans of a certain band, and they kind of give the fan perspective. And this is going to be an interesting one because today my guest is Harry Clay, who's a bass player who's been a musician since at least, through the 70s. And one of the cool things about Harry is that he was a bandmate of Mick Mars's for a long, long time before Motley Crue even started. So he has a lot of firsthand knowledge of not only playing with Mick before Motley Crue, but also kind of what the formation of Motley Crue and the transformation of Mick's playing in the 70s to the 80s and all that kind of stuff. Not only that, he's been on the Sunset Strip scene through most of that burgeoning era, so he'll have a lot to talk about. Harry, how are you?
Well, very good, Steve. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. So I think not a lot of people know that much about what Mick was doing before Motley Crue, and I think that's kind of by design. I don't think he or anybody in Motley really wanted to broadcast it. So maybe you could start from the beginning of when you met Mick and how that worked out.
Well, I first met Mick in the summer of 1973, and my band Whitehorse, that started in Ocean Beach, California, down in San Diego, had gravitated up into the Orange County scene. There were quite a few clubs like Finnegan's Rainbow, which then became the Cuckoo's Nest, which was a famous punk venue in later years. Bob Deal, as he was known back then, was in the audience and used to come and watch us and sometimes help us load out equipment when we were pulling out. Whitehorse was gigging 25, 26, 27 nights a month. We were really very busy all across the West Coast, and this was one of our main venues that we would play. And through band politics, a guitar player left, and Mick, or Bob as he was known back then, started rehearsing with the keyboard player and the drummer. The keyboard player had relocated from San Diego up to Santa Ana, and Bob Deal was from Westminster, right there inland from Newport Beach. And Bob finally got a chance to go out on the road with Whitehorse at New Year's of 74.
What did you think of his playing when he joined?
Well, when I first met Bob, he had a Gibson SG with a cracked neck that had been glued, and that was his only guitar, cracked at the headstock, and he used to have intonation problems with it. He was always fighting with that thing to find the sweet spot because it just, it was somewhat compromised. But he had a really fat tone, and he was really, really good on slide guitar. And when I first knew him in 73 and early 74, Bob's primary influence was Duane Allman. He loved the Allman Brothers, and he loved Ronnie Montrose. So he had that fat Gibson sound, and he really knew how to wail on the slide. But he was very, very poor. He had no clothes whatsoever. The guy had like a T-shirt and a pair of jeans and, a coat. And he just really came from very, very, very humble background. And I got to know his family, and I knew his first wife, and I knew his little boy, Les Paul, and his little daughter, Stormy. They were only about maybe 3 years old and 1 year old back then.
Now, was he poor just because he's like, hey, I want to make music and playing guitar my life. I don't have time to like show up at a job. Is that kind of what his mindset
Well,
was?
he was a Westminster High School dropout,
Okay.
and he'd had a couple of scuffling jobs, and he'd been in a couple of scuffling bands, but nobody that had ever really gotten to where they were gigging steadily. I don't think he was in any bands that had management or an agency. So he looked at Whitehorse, who was out there. You know, back then, if you pulled $1,200-$1,500 a week for the band, that was considered pretty good money, because even with a 5-piece band, you're making $200-$300 a month. And back in the early 70s, you could rent a house for $200 a month.
Sure.
So, you know, financially, we were in pretty decent shape. And so Bob really wanted to join the band, and we got sent out on a 10-week road tour at the beginning of January, starting in Denver. And we loaded up after New Year's Eve, playing in Long Beach, and headed for Denver. And, of course, we all had our suitcases and all our gear loaded up in the truck, and Deal showed up in his same red leather coat and dirty white T-shirt and one pair of jeans. I don't even think he had a toothbrush. It was sad, but he was good.
Yeah.
But it was like, oh my God, what are we getting ourselves into?
Yeah, I think, you know, obviously Motley Crue didn't want to, you know, they had the bad boys of rock exterior, but I think he was pretty mild-mannered and stuff. Is that the case when you were working with him?
Well, Bob is mild-mannered, but he has a pretty wicked sense of humor. And so Bob was definitely a unique fellow. And I can remember riding in the truck and, you know, being on the road, driving across Arizona, and here's this poor guy sitting next to us, and he'd say, someday I'm going to have a wall of amps as high as that building, and we'd look at him and go, yeah, Bob, yeah, right.
And he was like a little redhead with a mustache then, like very 70s out, right?
Absolutely. He's got bright red hair and freckles, and the poor guy, if he took off his shirt and went outside in the middle of winter, he'd get sunburned in 10 minutes.
Sure. So how long was he in Whitehorse? I know you guys, like you said, you had like a good road ethic, and you probably played a ton of shows. How many years did that last?
Well, Bob got in the band, started hanging with us in the summer of 73 and the fall of 73, and officially he went on the road as a roadie with us in that January road tour. That was the first time he'd been on the road, and the poor fellow was getting on the telephone and calling his wife and his kids back in Westminster twice a day, and honestly, by the end of the first month, I think he'd spent all his money on long-distance phone calls. And back then, phone calls were a lot more expensive. Now we're used to having cell phones and unlimited calling, and, you know, you don't even worry about area codes. But back then, it was very expensive, and he had a really hard time. He really... He worked hard. He carried his weight. He was a good guy, but financially, he was a disaster.
Right.
His kids were already on welfare, and I wasn't really aware of it when he got in the band. But later, I found out that he'd actually had some rough spots with his first wife, Sharon, and he'd been picked up for non-payment of child support once or twice and landed in jail. And he just didn't have any money.
Sure.
And he just, it was difficult. And then within about the first year, he separated from the wife and the kids, and he moved in with the drummer, the upside-down drummer, Jack Valentine, and I had now had a condo by the beach in Huntington Beach. Almost all of us, we'd all gravitated from San Diego up into Orange County, which to us back then, that meant you were an LA band, even though we didn't live in Hollywood.
And why do you call him the upside-down drummer?
Well, Jack Valentine, the original drummer for Whitehorse, who was probably Bob Deal's best friend, dreamed up bolting down all his drums to a wooden platform that was kind of like a garage door that laid down flat on the ground, and he put it on garage door rollers, and he fabricated a steel frame, and he invented this drum cage that would lift his drums sideways up and over and suspend them upside down, and he would play for the last 5-6 minutes on our finale, completely upside down, double bass, full tilt.
That really sounds like another drummer that I've heard of.
Well, certainly Tommy Lee has taken it to new heights because he's got a lot of money to spend and his roller coaster and all the things that he's thought about. And, my hat's tipped to him for his showmanship. But Jack Valentine, the Whitehorse drummer, was the person who invented the upside-down drums. And Mick Mars, Bob Deal, helped Jack fabricate and do all the welding on that cage in our garage in Huntington Beach. And Mick Mars, Bob Deal, told Tommy Lee about it probably in 82 or 83, and that's how Tommy got the idea.
Yeah, because Tommy first just kind of leaned forward, I think, on Theater Pain, and then from there he was going upside down on the Girls, Girls, Girls tour.
Well, you can do all kinds of things if you got enough money.
Sure. So how long did Bob last in Whitehorse? I mean, did he last as long to the end of the band, or did he leave before you left, or how'd that work?
Well, Bob was in it to the end, but he did go out of it once or twice. And all bands, especially 5-piece bands, there's usually somewhat of a power, I won't say a power struggle, but there's a hierarchy. Mm-hmm. And the keyboard player, who was also a guitarist and singer, and myself, who also played guitars and wrote songs and sang, and the lead singer, who was also an instrumentalist. The three of us kind of were the main songwriters, and Bob somewhat gravitated to the drummer, Jack Valentine, and they were kind of the minority power in the group. Mm-hmm. And Jack Valentine, the drummer, felt that our music was being pushed to commercial. And the drummer, who played upside down, was a progressive rock freak who he thought Frank Zappa was commercial. He loved Gentle Giant, which makes Pink Floyd or Yes sound commercial. They're very good musicians, but we were being groomed much more as a four-on-the-floor, straight-ahead rock band. We had a couple of singles that they wanted to put out that were more in the vein of Bachman Turner Overdrive, Taking Care of Business, and our drummer wanted to get in there and do all kinds of progressive rock, trip beats and extra odd time frames and just anything to what we felt was mess up the song. And so we had artistic differences, and he quit. Mm-hmm. And he wanted Bob to go with him. We stayed friends, but he stepped out for a while. And by that time, he'd hooked up with his second, well, not wife, but girlfriend that had his baby, Eric, his second son. And we were all a big family, and somebody got to go on the tour this month and somebody got to stay home.
Right.
And so basically Whitehorse merged with another band from the South Bay, which was called Holy Smoke, which would later become Vendetta. So there were these two bands that were kind of from the same management, and we shared members. And so the lead singer for Whitehorse ended up in that second band. So Bob came back into the band, and that's how we eventually ended up with the female lead singer, Michelle Myers, a.k.a. Mickey Mars, the Heavenly Body.
Wait, you're telling me there was a Mickey Mars in your band and it wasn't Bob Deal?
That is exactly right.
And this is Whitehorse featuring Mickey Mars?
Whitehorse. By 76, we were playing at Gazzari's, and we were a house band there for many weeks, and we did an open audition, and a bunch of different singers came in, and in comes this gal all dressed in black like a female Johnny Cash, and she had a pretty rockin' voice, a real bluesy voice with a big black floppy hat, and her name was Mickey Mars, M-A-R-Z. And her real name is Michelle Myers, but she had her business card, Mickey Mars, the Heavenly Body. And we hired her. And so this was still Bob Deal on lead guitar with Mickey Mars on lead vocals and a new drummer, and David and myself. I was the sole original member that was in Whitehorse from the day that the band started in early 72 until December of 77 when we broke up.
Well, what caused the breakup? Like, what was the final kind of whimper or explosion?
More interesting story. When we first started the band down in San Diego, we were known as the Fat City Band. We got a gig and we go, wow, we're in Fat City, and boom, there was the name. Well, we got the chance to do some opening acts at the San Diego Civic because we were in the union and we were coming up, and they go, you got to have a better name. Well, I put together a list of names, and one night after watching an Errol Flynn pirate movie, I came up with Motley Crue, spelled C-R-O-O, Motley Crue.
And this is like in 72 or 3 or something.
1972.
Wow.
And I presented this to our management as a potential name. And the name got voted down in favor of Whitehorse. And the only reason they went with Whitehorse is because we were drinking Whitehorse scotch in the office of the management.
And please tell me someone said, Motley Crue, stop being an idiot. We're talking about good rock and roll names here.
Well, see, in 1972, Mott the Hoople was quite big.
Good point. Very good
and
point.
So a number of people went, you can't do a name like Motley Crue. That's too close to Mott the Hoople.
It would be like Whitesnake and Great White. They sound like it was all those white bands, but there was really a decade between them. Yeah. All good things come to an end, and I guess Whitehorse has an end. But we're going to listen to a Whitehorse song right now, aren't we? Is it actually a Whitehorse song? It's Only Money?
Well, It's Only Money was written by me. It's from our last 24-track sessions for Whitehorse from November of 1977. It's Bob Deal on lead guitar, Mike Tolan on drums, David Day, the second guitarist, and on Hammond organ, and me on bass and synthesizers and lead vocals. And this song was shopped to numerous record companies by our management at ATCO as Motley Crue in 1970.
So this was Motley C-R-O-O song, It's Only Money, featuring who would become Mick Mars.
Well, he was still Bob Deal because Mickey Mars was still in the band.
Wow.
She played flute and she sang flute kind of like Ann Wilson and Hart, but she's not on It's Only Money. It's a 4-piece on that one. And then we recorded another tune with her in that same session.
Okay, well, I just want to let my audience know that they could, if any of their diehard crew heads out there, and I know there's a lot. I mean, these guys still play arenas, but if you want to ask your friends, I have an early Motley Crue recording featuring Mickey Mars, called It's Only Money, and it's from about 5 or 6 years before Too Fast for Love. It'd probably blow their friends' minds.
November 1977.
1977. So here we are. It's Only Money, only on Heavy Metal War Stories. Yeah. Wow, wasn't that great? It's Only Money. What'd you think of that? Was that one of your favorites, or was that not your personal favorite era of Whitehorse?
Well, it's bittersweet because it was the end. We did 3 songs, 24-track, and the month that we did that, another band from England who was, I believe, a nephew of Peter Townsend from The Who, released an album on Capitol Records, and they called it Southern California's Whitehorse.
Get out.
Well, we were still gigging as Whitehorse, but we were shopping our record deal as Motley Crue, CROO. But it was this guy from England that had never performed in the U.S., and they got a review in Rolling Stone magazine as Southern California's Whitehorse.
Ouch.
Well, holy cow, we'd been performing for the last 5 years. We'd done approximately 12 to 1,300 gigs across the West Coast. We were in the union. We had the union backing us, and our lawyers at ATCO went to Capitol and demanded a payout, a buyout. And Capitol came in, and I don't know, I don't remember exactly. They offered us $25,000, $30,000 to shut up and go away. Well, I went, guys, look, here's our chance to pay for more recordings, a new backdrop, buy a new PA, renovate our truck, and let's move ahead with the name.
I'm going to stop you right here because I'm going to guess the ending of the story. You can tell me if I'm right or wrong, but I'm going to guess all the guys said, yeah, that sounds great. Actually, give us our share because we got a lot of bills to pay, and see you later.
Well, it's close. What happened was Mick Mars, who'd been in the band maybe 6 months, and the drummer who'd been in the band not much longer, and Bob Deal said, no, 25,000 isn't enough. We want 100.
Oh no. And Bob is the guy who's never had two nickels to rub together is gonna
He had no money. His kids were on welfare. He's got a third kid, soon to be on welfare as well. And basically, the band broke up in disgust because the deal went down the trash. Oh. And instead of taking, again, I don't remember if it was 25 or 30,000. It was something of that nature.
But you guys would have gotten $5,000 each, even if you guys had said, I want to put the money in my pocket. $5,000 then was $10,000 or $15,000 today, right?
Absolutely.
Wow.
And so the deal fell through. And so, the band broke up.
So I know you did a bunch of stuff in the 80s, and when we start talking stories, we can totally into that. But I'll fill in a little blank just because of common sense. But if you guys had split up, and there had to have been a time where you get word that, hey, remember that Bob Deal guy, that crazy red-haired mustache, no money guy? He's playing with these 20-year-olds with giant spiked hair, and they're one of those, like, the 20-year-old kid band. What's going on with this? We got to check this out. Am I right on base? Is this how you heard about the other Motley Crue's formation?
Bob fit in because he's a little munchkin. He's only about. He's such a small fellow that he could. A little bit of hair dye and the right clothes, and he could look like a kid again. And that's one of the reasons that he hid his background for so long, because he really was deathly afraid that maybe people wouldn't accept him because he was too old. He wasn't too old, obviously.
Was he like 31 at the time when Motley started, about there?
Well, Bob's birthday is in 51. He's a year and a half younger than I am.
So he's about 30-ish, yeah.
Yeah.
Which doesn't seem old, but I get it when, Motley Crue are the crazy 20-year-olds from the streets, that it might seem a little like you wouldn't want to broadcast that you have practically a decade of gigging under your belt. Do you have a lot of knowledge about, like, right when he joined Motley Crue, or was it already pretty much a full-on band by the time you heard of it?
Well, Bob came back from Alaska, and they played up there for several months, and then they came back, and they were also going over to Arizona to the Parker Strip. There were a number of clubs on the river out there where you could go and play for a week at a time, and down to Yuma, and up to Las Vegas. There were a number of clubs where they'd hire bands for a week at a time. And Bob was playing in Vendetta down in Yuma, and he got fed up during one of the gigs, and he pushed over his stack on stage, and he got asked to leave. Right. And he came back to Los Angeles without a gig, and now he's out of the band again, and that's when he ran his ad, honest to God, as an absolute end of the road, last ditch, I don't know what I'm gonna do effort. And that he ran that loud, rude guitarist, willing to do anything ad in the Recycler.
Wow.
And I remember it very well because I was still living in North Hollywood and I had my bands going.
So you saw the same ad that like Nikki Sixx saw, and you just said, "Oh, I know who that guy is."
Well, absolutely, and I knew Nikki and Lizzie Gray, or Steve Perry's his real name, from London, and Tommy, when they were in their cottage in North Hollywood, when they were advertising for new members, and they were calling the band Christmas.
And what did you think of those guys? I mean, it's easy to like look back and go, "Oh, Nikki Sixx, he was always a badass," or at least history has proven it. But I mean, I could see at the time going, "Oh, those guys don't know how to play." I don't know if they did or didn't, but you could possibly go, "Well, they didn't know how to play. I would never answer their ad if it had been me," kind of a thing.
Well, they had a look. Right. What say? They had a look.
But I guess you're probably 8 years older than Nikki, or at least a little bit. It might almost be like if some guy was 27 and there was an emo band looking for members, you'd be like, "Yeah, that's fun, kids. That's not really my thing. I like Deep Purple," like that kind of a thing. Would that be kind of how you were?
I think that might possibly be kind of accurate.
But I guess Mick was willing to overlook that, because Mick wasn't a fan of Kiss. Mick wasn't, but he was into musicians like the Allman Brothers, and this had to seem like a pretty big departure, at least from your eyes, right? When he would join this Motley Crue band.
Well, Mick called me probably around March or April of '81 and told me, "Harry, I've got a new band going, and we've taken the name Motley Crue." And of course, I kind of chuckled and laughed. After all these years, the name's maybe going to stick now. And I kind of congratulated him. "No problem. That's great." And I'd bought a studio over in Burbank, Vision Studio, that had been the guy who was backing Quiet Riot. It was Randy Rhoads' home studio, and I'd bought it and taken over this studio, a rehearsal studio and a little recording studio. And Bob says, "Well, I got the band going, and I've got Alan Kaufman." Well, I knew Alan Kaufman because I knew Stick, the roadie, and Stick was Mick's best friend who drove him around and was kind of his butler and his protege.
That's pretty nice if a guy like Mick, who never had any money, had a butler before he was even famous.
Stick was the roadie for Vendetta. Oh. And so Stick and Bob were kind of the minority little clique in Vendetta. And then next thing you know, Mick is out of Vendetta, and Stick believed in Mick. And Stick had tried to get Alan Kaufman to invest money in Vendetta, but they were older guys. All the guys were in their 30s, and it wasn't an exciting. They were all good players. They were all good musicians. They're all friends of mine, even to this day. But it wasn't something that somebody wanted to go and invest in. And so almost within the first month or two of Motley Crue starting, Mick got them over into my studio over in Burbank to start rehearsing. And of course, I was down there at the Starwood on their very first gigs with Y&T. I well remember when Vince Neil had mousy brown hair, wasn't even a bleached, wasn't a blonde.
No kidding.
And oh yeah, and I played with Tommy Lee, got to play bass and play with Mick and Tommy a few times while we were waiting for the other guys to show up when they blocked out studio time at my studio.
There's a kind of a consensus, I think. You can tell me what you think about it, that Mick and Tommy, even though Tommy was a really young kid, were kind of pretty well-rounded musicians, and Nicky and Vince were pretty bad at the beginning. Is that something you'd agree with?
Absolutely. Yeah. I remember Mick and I talking, saying how we wished that we had run into a Tommy Lee back when we were in Whitehorse, because we had so much polish and we had very good musicians in the band. We had a lot of songwriting, but we never had a really for real over-the-top drummer.
Oh, interesting, yeah.
And the kid was really, really good.
And he was 18 really, or something like that?
He was about 18 years old. Yeah.
Right on. So they're playing at the Starwood. How was that show? Were they bad, or were they like, well, the music's not there, but they look so good, maybe it'll turn into something?
Well, Mick was real solid. Tommy was solid. And Vince skipped a lot of words and would back off the mic on his high notes.
Even then, from show one till current, Vince missed a lot of words. Interesting.
From the very first time they ever did reviews in the Music Connection, and when they did reviews of Motley Crue in the LA Times, when they first played the Santa Monica Civic, talking about Vince Neil's disappearing high notes.
Yeah. Which is odd, because he has such a freaking high voice. I mean, that is like, I wonder why there's not more female Motley Crue tribute bands, because, I mean, that's pretty much the female range. You'd think, well, maybe he doesn't have the biggest range, but his natural voice is so high that it might not be a problem.
Well, I don't know. He was good at what he did. Yeah. And I remember being up in the balcony at the Starwood, and stage right, Mick's down there just below me, and I'm sitting up there with one of the Whitehorse roadies, one of his buddies from Mick's old high school buddies from Westminster, and we're slugging down the tequila. And in between the songs, when it would get quiet, we're going, Bob Dylan, Bob Dylan. And Mick is down there to ignore us because, he doesn't want to admit. And we'd go, Mickey Mars is a woman. and it's true. Mickey Mars was a woman. Right. But we'd keep going, Bob Dylan. And then Bob would hold up the black Les Paul and had duct tape, Mars, written on the back of his guitar. Hold it up the top of his head. So it was good-natured, and we loved him, and we were laughing, and we were drunk ex-musician buddies, and we're razzing him, but we were cheering him on. And I was happy for him that the guy had a chance for success, and I felt that he was going to be successful right from the very first I saw the band.
Motley Crue is such an interesting band, and in an era like so many bands. I mean, you had like guys like George Lynch and Warren DeMartini, and so many shredders in the '80s, and bands that could really sing. Like, I mean, Rob Halford got his biggest in the '80s, and Motley Crue is this band that had only one guitarist for metal. Most bands had two, and they probably both could shred. And their singer wasn't the greatest singer, and the bassist couldn't really play bass, even though he could write. And yet they became like one of the biggest. It's like this weird Cinderella story for a bunch of guys that you'd think wouldn't make it,
Right. The reason that Motley Crue became successful musically is because Mick Mars played Highway Star and he played Don't Fear the Reaper, and he played Montrose, and he played Rick Derringer, Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo, and he played every heavy-duty rock song, and he knew the chords, and he knew the solos, and he had intonation, and he had a precision and solidness to his playing. He had a classic rock background that most of these other guitar players never had.
So
And
like
that's
four
also,
other 20-year-olds that were in the band that looked like Motley Crue wouldn't have had that kind of musical
That's right.
knowledge as a unit that he brought to the table.
I can listen to practically every Motley Crue song off their first 3 or 4 albums, and I swear to God, I could probably tell you what song Mick took his inspiration from when it comes to the rhythm playing
Right.
or the guitar solo. And for that matter, Eddie Van Halen is the same way. Eddie Van Halen knew 300 or 400 classic rock songs.
Sure.
And then he turned around and made his own music. But a lot of these guys never really had that background.
Yeah.
And that was the difference. I have always believed that Mick Mars is really the music of Motley Crue. And that's not to take away from Nicky's songwriting or lyrics or Vince's vocals and dancing. And, of course, it takes Tommy Lee's drumming to propel that music. But really, you stop and think about it, Mick Mars is the music.
Wow. Yeah. So you know, I mean, they I know they were clicking around the clubs and all that, and you were like, yeah, this band's great, but how much contact did you have when they really started blowing up? Like, did Mick still keep in close contact with you, or was he kind of, you know, doing his own thing? What happened there?
Well, Mick stayed good friends with me initially.
Uh-huh.
I was at all their early gigs at the Starwood and the Troubadour and the Whiskey and Pookie's in Pasadena and the what was it called? The Raymond Theater. No, I'm trying to think of it. There was a big theater in Pasadena that they did we did several really big shows at,
Mm-hmm.
and then the Santa Monica Civic. And by that time, I owned a guitar shop down on Hollywood and Vine called Visions Music. I had several hundred guitars in they were all my personal collection that I bought, sold, trade, wheel and deal out of the recycler, new and used.
Sure.
And Mick would call me up, and I would show up at the gigs. And back then, he couldn't afford a roadie anymore, and Stick had become more of a general band helper
Mm-hmm.
for his Alan Kaufman. And so I was Mick's guitar tech for a whole bunch of these early gigs. And then all of a sudden, come New Year's of, what would it have been? I guess 83,
Mm-hmm.
84. I forget. You know, I'd have to think for a minute exactly what year it was. We're playing at the Santa Monica Civic, and they fired Alan Kaufman. And all of a sudden, Stick is gone, Alan's gone, all their management is gone, and here we are on New Year's Eve backstage at the Civic, and Vince is crying backstage because his phone has been shut off, and he was fighting with Beth, his girlfriend or wife or whatever she was, and Mick is sitting back there, and they don't know where they're going to get any money, and what are they going to do, and this was just before the US Festival that spring.
Oh, right.
And so we did this gig, and everything was great. But we're looking for new management, and that's when their new managers, Kovacs and all of them, came into the scene.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, about 2 weeks later, a manager calls me up at my store and says, Harry, in order for you to continue your professional relationship with the band, we want you to donate your 3 most expensive guitars in your shop, and we're going to give one of them away at some record signing or something at Tower Records, and the other ones are for Mick. And I told him, well, thank you very much for the honor, but
thanks.
I don't think that I'm going to be strong-armed into giving away $5,000 in order to continue my professional relationship to the band that I came up with the name for, and the guitar player that's played with me and lived with me for 7 out of the last 10 years.
Right.
And with the snap of the fingers, I was persona non grata, and I was never again invited to any of their shows. And at the same time, they basically ceased communication with anybody from the old days.
Wow.
All the old former band members, everybody, it just stopped. And I think they even kind of hint that in the Dirt book, which I've read a couple of times, despite its inaccuracies. They talk about how they wanted to suspend being in touch or being around hanger-ons that were supposedly milking them for money or whatever.
Right. So
and all of a sudden
this is happening like on the eve of Shout at the Devil, pretty much, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, on the eve of the US Festival.
Oh, okay. Which
really it was Mick was talking about how great it was going to be. They were thinking of going to Europe, and they might get to tour with Def Leppard. And of course, back then Def Leppard was bigger than them.
Right, right. Well, it's funny you say that, because I know the Shout of the Devil, they played horrible, but it kind of ignited them as a force, and they look great doing it and stuff. But the interesting thing about that, and I mean, you've told a lot of stories, but I think I'll tell one of my own. Like after Shout of the Devil, and they did go to Europe, and I was a really little kid. I don't know if I was 8 or 9, but I knew who they were, and I had Judas Priest records and some Iron Maiden records, and I just moved to London with my parents, and we were living in the Holiday Inn at Swiss Cottage in London. And one day I get in the elevator with my mom and I think my dad too. And we go up the elevator, and the elevator doors, there's me, my mom and dad, maybe not my dad, and some other older people. And all of a sudden the doors are about to close, but they open up again, and there's this guy with white hair, and there's this guy about 9 feet tall with black hair, and there's a dude with purple hair with a nose ring. And the dude with purple hair is talking in a British accent, and the doors close, so it's just this private elevator. And the dude with the purple hair goes, yeah, I was fucking her right. I was fucking her up the arse. And then her husband walks in, and he goes, I'll cut your bollocks off, motherfucker. And he comes after me. And the two other guys, the white hair guy and the black hair guy, are like, that's cool. And I was like, fuck, those guys kind of look like Motley Crue. So we get out of the elevator, which was kind of awkward after that conversation. And we go in the room, and the phone rings in the hotel room. My dad picks it up, and he just says, no. And so he says to me after he gets on the phone, he says, was this, blah, blah, blah. And my dad said no. And he goes, is this anybody connected with Motley Crue? And I said no again. So I was like fucking shitting bricks that Motley Crue were in the hotel, and that's who they were in the elevator with us. But then the next day, they're all in a British
accent. Those guys got nothing but Valley accent.
Yeah, exactly. But it's just that it was the total dudes. Where's my car? Aston Kutcher thing, where they're this British guy's telling the story, and they're just like, that's awesome. But the next day, we get out of the elevator, and there's you can see they're in the bar. And I'm like shitting bricks, like, oh my God, fucking Motley Crue is in the same like universe as me. But my mom, who is just fearless, just goes, oh my God, there they are, and drags me over by the hand and goes, hey guys, how's it going? This is my son, and his father took him to a Judas Priest show. Wow, he couldn't hear for a week. How do you play so loud? And they were really cool. I mean, this is like a band that just kind of got a taste of stardom and aren't all jaded by it. So they laughed and signed like, a cocktail napkin for me. But Vince wasn't there. The other guys were there. But Mick was really cool. Mick hung out with us for like half an hour, just chatting with my mom while I'm standing there too freaked out to even talk. And the funny thing was I was just standing there kind of not saying much, and my mom was saying, my mom's super cool but doesn't know anything about music, just asking and stuff. And the funny thing was, I don't know if you know about the Helter Skelter picture disc, but they had that cool picture disc that came out, and the band had never seen it. The manager walked over and goes, "Check it out, dudes," like right when I was standing there. And they'd never seen it, so they're all bugging out on their, awesome Niels Lazauer photo shoot picture disc. And my mom's like, "Which one is you?" to Mick, and he's like pointing himself out. And she's like, "Oh, charming." And he was even kind of semi-apologetic, like, "I have to play the radical," kind of a thing. So she even said, "Can referring to me, can he have it?" And they were like, "Well, it's our only one." But Mick was super cool. Mick took down my room number and left a press kit in my box in the Holiday Inn. So, as a guy under 10, I kind of can't forget that how cool he was back in the day.
Yeah. Well, he's been through a lot. Mick is. I sit and think about it. He must have just turned 60 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, this just in May he would have turned 60.
Mm-hmm.
So, I hope he's got a lot more years in him.
Yeah, definitely. I know, but I don't know. Like you said that you're not in close contact after they kind of cut ties, but when Motley Crue kind of reformed, I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago when they decided they were going to get back together, and there was a lot of talk like, as if they could Mick could even do it, but they've been doing it for like 6 years now, and he seems to be playing well and into it and able to tour and stuff.
Well, I don't really know the story. It's funny because for a while there, 6-7 years ago, I was getting emails from Stormy and from Les Paul, who lived back in Kentucky or Tennessee, and from Eric Deal, who from the other wife. And a number of times I'd gotten a lot of correspondence from them, and the kids never really never really connected with their dad. And they would write me and ask me stuff about the old days, just like we're talking now, I guess kind of to fill in the blanks or something.
Sure.
But I guess there's just something that you have to give up to reach that level of stardom.
Right.
I don't know. We reached out to him, several of us in the old band. The old lead singer from Whitehorse and Vendetta is one of my oldest and closest friends. And, of course, Mick, he kind of took Mick under his wing for, many tours. He's reached out to him, and the singer comes up and stays here at my house often. We're still good buddies, and we're in touch with a number of the other old players. We all have fond memories of each other. After enough years go by, you forget the difficult times and you just laugh about the funny times, because what else is there to do,
Absolutely.
But Mick really has never shown any. I think that probably it just make him feel old or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't feel old, but maybe he thinks that we're going to bring him down or something.
Right.
But no, I've never spoken to Mick again. Maybe the last time I saw him might have been in '87 at the Troubadour Bar.
Okay, it's like ran into him.
Yeah.
And just sort of like kind of exchanged pleasantries, and that's
hey,
that.
man, what's going on?
Well, what about, I know you came from an earlier era, and even though you played all kinds of 70s music, and I'm not saying you'd be tied to that. I know you had bands in the 80s. What did you think of Motley Crue? Because I have to assume someone who's maybe, a few years older than Nicky and all that would just be like, this is kids stuff. I mean, it's great that Mick is doing it, but this is not great music. What do you think?
He's got a handful of songs that I'd turn up if I hear it on the radio that, they're good songs. There's a few of their songs that I listen to them and I think Cliché City and they just really don't do much for me. I honestly never really cared for Vince as a vocalist.
Yeah.
And certainly Nicky never really did anything for me inspiring as far as being a bass player.
Sure.
But I recognize that he's written a lot of great songs, and I enjoy them because there's my old guitar player buddy Mick playing away, and certainly Tommy Lee is a strong, energetic drummer, and he's fun to listen to. I would much rather listen to a David Gilmour album or there's a lot of music that I prefer much more to the music of Motley Crue. But I'll always have a warm place for them because of knowing them from way back and all my years of gigging with Mick. I probably played 1,200 gigs with Mick across the West Coast. Mm-hmm.
So
and when I say gigs, a lot of those were 5-hour gigs.
Wow.
If you want to talk sets, I've probably played 5,000.
It must have been interesting for Mick. I mean, I don't know who the least season was, if it was Vince or Tommy, but for Mick to be under his 1,500th show when maybe one of those guys was on his 9th show, like the just the musical divide there must have been a little bit kind of strange.
Well, I think that Mick honestly believes Motley Crue is his band.
Yeah,
it's his band. He's quiet about it, and he's got his own unique personality, but that's his music. And certainly, I'm well aware that Tracy or DJ or any of these guys could probably come in and copy his parts and put their own spin on it and all that, but they haven't. And Mick is the guy who gets up there and makes the music.
Right.
And that's why the bass is, a lot of times practically inaudible. Mm-hmm. And Tommy's back there slamming the beat behind him, but Mick is making the music.
Well, did you? I think, like you said, you read The Dirt, and I don't know that much about that era, but wasn't there kind of Motley Crue already had a guitar player, and Mick was like, "There's no way I'm in 2-guitar band. I'm the guitar player. You fire that guy, and I'll join." Nicky
was auditioning guitar players. London had broken up, but he was still hanging with Steve Perry, who's Lizzie Gray. Mm-hmm. I know him as Steve Perry, just like I knew Nicky as Frank.
Right.
From 77, 78. I knew those guys that far back. And Steve Perry, or Lizzie Gray, was right there with Nicky, and he wanted in that band. And of course, what was it Merry-Go-Round or what song? He has a songwriting on the first album.
Oh, okay. So he was kind of working with them.
Yes, he's got 1 or 2 songwriting credits on the first album, mm-hmm. 1 for sure. And I know that Greg Leon had been trying to get into the band, and Greg was from the Pasadena area. And so there were, I know they always talk about a couple of names, but I think those are made-up names.
Right. I was about to mention, we've dropped the name of The Dirt, which is the Motley Crue autobiography, and it's a really good book. But I actually know a little bit. I actually have I know the guy who wrote it. When I say wrote it, the guy who did all the heavy lifting when Nicky and Vince took their stories. His name's Neil. And Neil's written a bunch of books and a bunch of Rolling Stone articles, and this guy is no stranger to just give me the facts and I'll twist them into a fun, interesting read no one will be able to put down. So anything he writes, you take it with a grain of salt. It's like the interesting version of what happened. But in the dirt, they said that there was this wimpy guy who had to wash his hands after he played, and Mick just walked in and said, "You're fired. No, if there's only one guitar player in my band, and it's me." And between the guys that you mentioned, do you have an idea who that is, or if it's just a complete
I really don't
fiction?
know. I really don't know.
Right.
But Mick had, when he left Video Noir, which was the band we had after Whitehorse in 78 and 79, the vocalist that we had, Randy, played second guitar. And on one of our last gigs, he and Mick got in a shoving match over the singer playing too loud on rhythm, and the couple punches were thrown.
Wow.
And Mick absolutely had a complex about, this is my position, and I don't want somebody else stepping on my toes.
And I think, I'm not that huge on Motley. I love Shout of the Devil, but, the rest of it, I'm kind of, But I know when John Corabi joined the band, he was a guitar player, and I have heard things about Mick not loving that.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I never knew Corabi, but I'm aware of that, and I remember thinking about that. And Mick just got to a point where he did not like that was his domain.
Right.
And whatever.
Yeah, but you have to think it must have been his idea. I mean, what other iconic 80s metal band, except I guess Van Halen did set the stage, but almost all of them in the 80s, Van Halen started in the 70s, and it's a rare exception to have an 80s metal band that only has one guitarist.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah, so I think we've done a pretty good, thorough, exhaustive job about the early history of Motley Crue. Do you have any other story kind of from that era or about them that you want to kind of end off with?
Oh, I could get going on all kinds of tangents, and I don't want to bore anybody. But it's a long time ago now. The guys have been around a long time. I don't think anybody really thought that they were going to last as long as they did. And it is quite amazing to see them up there. And in many ways now, they're almost compared to the Rolling Stones and, big bands like that. It's really something.
Cool. Well, I just want to say, I think we'll wrap it up. I think we've got a great episode here, and I just want to say thank you, Harry, for being on it and letting everybody know about a lot of the things in Motley Crue's early history that most people would not know about if not for you being there at the right place and time.
Well, I hope it was fun and interesting for everybody.
Yeah, that was great. Harry Clay, everybody, Mick Mars' old bandmate. So that concludes another episode of Heavy Metal War Stories. We'll be back at you soon. So don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Then you get each and every episode as they come out. Tell your friends and leave comments. Thank you for everybody leaving comments and giving it 5 stars on all the different review sites, including iTunes. So we'll see you soon. And I've been Stevie Peavy, and you haven't. Good night.
With your host, Stevie.